before I begin, I actually, since we've been sitting down the whole time, I kind of want us to do a quick exercise. Nothing like jumping jacks, but it's going to be a simple question. Can I get the men to stand up from their seats? And yeah, just take a good look. Take a good look at the room. So from a show of hands, how, okay, now you guys can have a seat. Can I get the women to stand up, please? All right. Who noticed this gap from yesterday? From a show of hands, men and women, please have a seat. Who noticed the gap? I don't see, you know, and it's a lot of women who raise their hands. Thank you. My boss just raised his hand now. Great, thank you everyone. Can we go back to the presentation? Thank you. So, I like to move around when I present. So a little bit about the Women's Digital Financial Inclusion Hub. We initially launched in June of 2022. It is under the UNCDF. So I currently work with the United Nations Capital Development Fund with the Ethiopia team. My wonderful team is here, so happy to see you guys. And I'm specifically leading the project alongside my colleague Zoe Taddese on the WDFI project. It is specifically an advocacy hub where we work closely with regulators, CSOs, private and public sector organizations and companies where we want to advocate for not only financial inclusion, but digital financial inclusion for women, and adding some gender intentionality in some of the work that we do. Another, I remember Atoyi Lebes mentioned a little bit about the cross-Asian cultural exchange. So a good thing is that we also, alongside with our partners, Women's World Banking, lead an Indonesia hub as well. So they've both been piloted around the same time. And it was wonderful. We actually managed to also get some of our Indonesian colleagues to come and do a nice cultural exchange and see how we have so many similarities, and also the areas that we differ in, we can fill in those gaps. So the reason why I got everyone to stand up today is because I wanted you guys to get a visual representation about some of the figures that I'll be presenting. The gender gap is not just something that is talked about, it's not just figures, but it's in this room. And when we talk about gender intentional policy, it means that it is embedded in the framework of our organizations, of our companies, even in our homes. So before I begin, I want you guys to ask yourselves, to what extent has there been increased access to usage of financial services in Ethiopia? Which segments of the population are benefiting most from innovation in financial technology, and why? And which types of services are most beneficial to women? So I'll give you guys a couple seconds to think about that as I present. So the importance of access is evident within our sector, but access to finance has been increasing regularly over the years in Ethiopia, which I'm happy to see. Financial institution accounts still lead the way for people in Ethiopia, yet gender gaps do also persist. And the barriers persist. Affordability, accessibility, and lack of documentation drives exclusion. And I also want to add gender norms. Of course, gender norms vary from region to region, country to country. So it's very hard to specify what it is, but they do exist. The division of labor between men and women vary. So that kind of can add a bit of a gap, and especially when it comes to access. But this is kind of some positive figures that I've seen. This is from the Findex data from, I think, 2022. So basically they talk about the increase in financial institution and adoption rates. So luckily, and I think the red arrow points it out, Ethiopia has been on a rise from 2014 all the way up to 2022. So that is something that is optimistic, that should drive our job, for us to do our jobs even more. I also do want to point out that these figures also emphasize the digital financial services that are still lagging behind amongst adults in Ethiopia. I do want to point out as well, so the top point over here mentions ownership of financial institutions and institutional accounts. So with women, of course, we do see, in comparison to the men, we do see around a 20% gap. That's just roughly a rough estimate between 2014 till 2022. So that gap initially was small, but it has gotten broader and wider as time progressed. But then now when it comes to mobile ownership, mobile money ownership, I do want to mention and point out that yes, these figures are fairly close, but there isn't enough sex desegregated data readily available. So it is very tough to kind of emphasize and justify that figure. So when I mentioned earlier about segments, what are the segments defined? So of course, not all Ethiopian women are the same. Everybody has different burdens and tasks and roles in their lives. So this is a figure and a scale that was developed by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Grid Impact, but they did talk about the classifications. So segment 1 mentions excluded marginalized, so women that don't have that access and might not have that opportunity as well. Excluded high potential, excluded but high potential, so has the chance to find those access points or has a chance to get access to resources, but just hasn't so yet. Then segment 3, which includes which is included and underserved. So they might have access to these devices or mobile payment or even an account, but are underserved or are not actively using it. And then we have segment 4. So it includes, it means that there are women that are included and not underserved. So women who do have the access and are utilizing those services. And I just want to quickly bring your attention. So I want us to take a look at segments 2, 3, and 4. Especially when it comes to segments 3, where they do have the access, but they're underserved. There is still a slight growth gap between 2017 and 2021. So in comparison to also segment 4, where you see women who have the access do have, initially started at 55. Hello? Okay. Initially started at 55%, but spiked up to 92% due to access opportunities. I also want to point out the GSMA study that emphasizes that there is still that 21% gap in mobile ownership, along with mobile internet ownership. So from the left side, you do see a 21% gap versus also the mobile internet access, which is an 11% gap. So that's just a short presentation. For you guys to have access to some of this information, feel free to scan the code or just approach me later at the end. So just quickly take a scan if you can. And then I'm going to switch to the Grid Impact study as well, where you can find all those figures, and you can do further reading on that. But yes, don't worry, I also have these QR codes. All right, so thank you guys for paying attention, and I hope these figures spoke to you. And I also now want to introduce our panelists. I think this is a good segue. These are women that I'm familiar with and have even recently got to know more. And it's been wonderful working with them. Hold on, I'm about to pull up my notes. There we go. Okay. So before we begin, I would like to introduce the panelists. I would like to introduce the program analyst of the AUC, the African Union Commission, Sandy Madonsela. Please come to the stage. Next, I would like to invite the advisor to the Vice Governor of the National Bank of Ethiopia, Weziro Marta Hailemariam. Please come to the stage. And finally, I would like to introduce and present the project expert at UN Women, Sinid Dufuk Adu. Please take your seats and we'll get started. So when we talk about gender intentionality, this session is, of course it's easy to check off quotas and say that there's, 50% women here, but when it comes to gender intentionality and embedding a lot of that in the framework of your organization, what does that look like to you? And this is an open question for any one of you guys.
Thank you very much, Leah. Sorry for that technical challenge. And I'd like to just say good afternoon to everybody in the room. I think briefly, just to answer your question, gender intentionality for the African Union Commission, who I'm representing today, really speaks to the need to mainstream women and the needs of women in any programming on any activities that we do. So if it's this digital financial conference, for instance, wherever we talk about the challenges, wherever we talk about the solutions, wherever we see how we want to move forward, I think gender intentionality to us means that we are mindful of the specific needs that women have whenever we are forging those solutions. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That was an excellent response. Yes, Weziro Marta, please. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you to invite us this gender specialist gap filling of this in the conference, payment system conference. So in the National Bank of Ethiopia, like other government institutions by law, there is the section to facilitate or to fill the gap gender-related issues. So in the promotion, like when a female can promote from one level to another, they give a rank more than men. So this is one of the gender gap filling for the National Bank of Ethiopia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leah. When we say gender equality, just briefly say that when we devise policies, when we design products or providing services, it needs to consider the practical needs, the practical interests, and the unique needs and interests of women. Otherwise, for example, if you are implementing interventions or designing different services or products, if that service or products are gender neutral, it might even reinforce negative consequences. So before that, we need to see from a gender perspective, we need to ensure that gender issues are really addressed starting from the very beginning at the designing to implementing stage. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to circle back to Sandy. It's okay. I think everyone has their own mic, so yeah. So I want to circle back to Sandy and ask, how can digital financial services be designed with gender intentionality in mind to address the specific needs and challenges of marginalized women? So, for instance, it could be safety features, mobile money access through feature phones, or addressing the digital literacy gap.
Thank you again, Leah. I'll speak mainly from a policy perspective, as that is the mandate of the African Union Commission. And I'd like to make particular reference to something that was said by one of the panelists from a session yesterday. He spoke about the need for policies and regulations to be progressive and stay up to date with changing times. And what does that mean for this particular topic that we are discussing today? Or in the case of gender intentionality, it means that we need up-to-date policies, frameworks, and strict regulations that necessitate the mindful consideration of gender differences, gender challenges, and gender needs whenever financial products and tools are being developed. And I think it goes without saying that the development of these digital financial tools and services alone is not enough for us to reach gender equity. We are trying to include the excluded. So we need to make the transition inclusive as well as attractive. Inclusive by addressing the supply side barriers. So this is inappropriate financial offerings, for instance. Maybe these are products that aren't mindful of the plight of women and therefore fall short in really achieving that gender and financial equity that we are after. And also maybe inadequate or inappropriate distribution channels, and also inadequate digital financial infrastructure, for instance. And then we make it attractive by understanding the needs as well as the demand side and behavioral barriers of women that continue to perpetuate the gender gaps that we observe today. And it would be remiss of me to talk about the need for enabling gender-sensitive policies and regulations without re-emphasizing, and I say re-emphasizing because this has been a common theme that has emerged over the past 2 days, and that's the need for strong data collection. So I think data evidence policy actions lead to evidence-based policy decisions, and it allows for a proactive rather than a reactive response, which is exactly what we need as we endeavor on the path to gender and financial equity. As I mentioned earlier, really the first and most important thing is for the women to, is for us to understand what the needs of the women are, where the gaps lie, and then we can forge those digital financial solutions and tools that really meet the needs and the challenges of the marginalized women. Another key element towards the achievement of financial and gender equality is financial literacy and financial and digital literacy training. And if I could shout this one out so loud that it echoes through the room, I really would, because I cannot stress enough how important it is. As we continue, or in addition to addressing the access barriers and challenges, we also need to address the usage challenges. So it's important for women to understand how to use these tools, to understand especially how to use them to empower themselves. And so that means how do I access credit? What is insurance and how can it help me? And also how can I build my savings? I'm a little bit shy to admit this in this forum, but I myself personally have not made the full transition to digital. And it's not because I'm ignorant, it's not because I don't want to, but there are a few of the offerings that still give me anxiety today, and a few of them that I don't know how to use. I am willing to make the full transition, but I think with a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more information, I'd be that much more comfortable to make the leap. And if that's my story as somebody who works in this space, imagine what the case is for a marginalized, excluded woman who has never in her life received any capacity building on the importance of digital financial transition, really. So again, I cannot stress enough how important capacitating and training our women on this really is. And as I round up, I'd like to bring it all together by saying that gender equity and financial equity can only be achieved through a group effort. So what this requires is that the necessary stakeholders join forces and work together for collective impact. So if, for instance, we understand, based on what I've said right now, that our pain points are inadequate policies, inadequate data, as well as low financial literacy, then we need to get those particular solution barriers in this room and in rooms like this so that they forge the solution and charter the way forward. And so my question today is, are these people in the room? And if they are in the room, are they going to leave this conference with a clear instruction of what they need to do to bridge the gap, particularly the gap in gender equality? And if they are leaving with that instruction, how? How are we going to hold them accountable to make sure that they do indeed deliver on impactful change and measures? And on that note, I would like to make mention and bring to the attention of everybody in the room a particular initiative of the African Union Commission. It's called the Wi-Fi Initiative, and it's a partnership framework that seeks to do exactly that. Leverage off of the efforts that are already being done by financial and economic players, or financial and economic inclusion players on the ground, and really bring everybody together to synergize and partner together for greater impact and scale. The initiative has 3 objectives. The first objective is to enhance the income of women and youth. We have 2 demographics that we are mandated to empower. So those are women and youth. So it's to enhance their income through access to job opportunities as well as access to entrepreneurship. So what this entails is having in place quotas that ensure that there are preferential spots reserved for women in employment and preferential spots reserved for women entrepreneurs wherever opportunities arise. The second objective holds us all in this room accountable, the financial sector, and really speaks to the need for the development of innovative financial products that are accessible, affordable, and available for our African women and youth. So this requires them sometimes being low cost or no cost, just fully mindful of the plight of our marginalized women and youth. And then finally, the third objective speaks to the creation of enabling policies and regulations that bring everything together and help us to gain momentum on our journey to universal financial inclusion. Usually, I would share a QR code that gives you access to our database or allows you to sign up to this initiative and partner with us as the AUC. Unfortunately, today I was unable to screen it, but if you do find me during the course of the day, I do have it on my phone, on me, and you can kindly scan it off of me and fill out the very short registration form so that you join part of the African Union database, and then we can work together to enhance financial and specifically digital financial inclusion of African women. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. That was very, very insightful. And I do want to, I guess, this is a good segue into Wezuro Marta, and I guess what regulators, and from the regulators' perspective, how, beyond access, how can financial service providers leverage digital financial services to promote financial literacy and usage among women and marginalized groups? So when I say marginalized, we're talking about grassroots women, women that are considered the last mile, the different micro-saving incentives, financial education bundles, and with mobile wallets. What are those examples that we can state?
Yes. Thank you. Let's come first that all we have has an account. Just start with, without an account, there is no digitalization and also instant payment. So in the National Bank of Ethiopia, let's give an overview that the financial inclusion strategies are enabling environment to have access to this unserved peoples or gender gaps. So when we see the first 2016 up to 2021 financial inclusion strategy, the focus was access to finance with quality and affordability. So in this case, the strategy has reviewed, assessed the barriers that have, when we studied this inclusive digital financial inclusions. So usage is one of pillars that identified the gaps that we feel the gender equality in the financial sector. Overall, the target was increasing the level of financial inclusion from 22% to 60%, but unfortunately, when the first this financial inclusion strategy, we didn't meet this 60%, but the level becomes 35%. But in the second 2021 or 2025, up to 25 financial inclusion strategy, which are initiative taken by the National Bank of Ethiopia, was focused on underserved people, regional also included. So in this case, the deepening of digital financial services is one of focus that we are given in the strategy to serve these unserved people. So overall, the target for this financial inclusion is increasing all over the financial level to 70%. Currently, it's now 46%, the level of inclusion overall. So we give focus for gender, like a program. We have one program, which is a Women Financial Inclusion Program, and also regional council program to address regionally. So when we come to this literacy and also other that may first to have access to women's or underserved people, there is a cross-cutting also, the program, financial education and consumer protection. So in this program, we are guided by the National Financial Inclusion Strategy, which is launched and also approved by the board, and also consumer protection that Solomon previously mentioned. There is a directive separate from like another directive. We opened the directorate to facilitate this strategy to implement consumer protection and national financial education strategy. So recently we launched also financial education module, which all financial sectors, all banks, microfinance, and also digital financial service providers can use it as a standard. So in this regard, actions also have to implement this, like creating of awareness for digital financial services and regional financial literacy, and also launching that I said before, specifically for women's financial education. And another is promoting Sharia compliance issues. So for these issues, like as a person or as a National Bank of Ethiopia, our role is to regulate and issue directives to implement these actions. So we provide direction or directives to all financial institutions to use these directives and also strategies and implement with some vendors or supporters that were here and implement these directives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's good to know that all these services are available as well. And it almost acts as an accountability tool as well to have some of these services and educational opportunities provided. So, no, thank you very much. I also want to ask Sinedu, from the UN Women perspective, I think I would really like to ask, how can digital innovation and financial services tackle socio-cultural norms hindering women's financial participation in Ethiopia? And that can look like many things, but from your experience, you know, as acknowledging the diverse ecosystem, culture, regions that, you know, compiles Ethiopia, what would that look like?
Okay, thank you. As Leah presented the data on the financial inclusion, we have seen that there is a progress. The financial inclusion for both women and men has been increasing from time to time. However, there is a huge gap. There is a huge gender gap in accessing, using, and also benefiting from this financial service outcomes. So in that case, one of the major root cause is this, the deeply rooted socio-cultural norms that embedded in our minds, that it affects all sectors, those who are involving in the financial market system. So in that case, even when we see the data from the socioeconomic survey, it shows that while the women's account ownership increases from time to time, but still when we see the gender gap is still widening, especially, for example, when we see the 2016 data, it was like 8%, but when it comes to 2019, it becomes 16, it's almost double. So it showed that there is a huge gender gap in accessing financial services, particularly the digital services. So in that case, one of the major root causes is this, the socio-cultural norms. So one of the things is that we need to recognize, all actors in the financial system need to recognize that these socio-cultural norms, how it affects the service provision, how financial institutions are providing services, what kind of products, are they really addressing the unique needs of women? Are we really touching their practical situations? So in this case, the digital financial inclusion or the digital financial services play a great role in achieving gender equality in financial inclusion, because it directly addresses the socio-cultural norms. For example, there is a time poverty among women. Many women are engaging their time, they invest more of their time in doing domestic activities. They invest more engaging in unpaid care and domestic activities. This prevents them to access or to travel to financial institutions, to get information, and also being networking like that of men, to get information and so forth. So these digital financial services, it addresses such kind of time poverty or shortage of time. And also in another case, there is a mobility constraints that we believe that particularly when you go to rural parts, the husbands may not allow women to travel, or they might not send them alone. They want to be with them while traveling to financial institutions and so forth. So in that case, no need of traveling to financial institutions. So the digital service plays a pivotal, crucial role in addressing such kind of cultural norms. And in addition to this, the decision-making role that women are mainly, those decision-making roles are mainly uptaken by men in the household. So in that case, when we give them such opportunity to access the digital financial services, we are empowering them to make a decision on their own income or on their own resources. So in different scenarios, the financial digital services plays a great role in addressing these socio-cultural norms. So we need to recognize how we're going to address those norms while we provide services, while we design policies, while we design initiatives or interventions, in order to ensure that there is inclusivity, in order to ensure that all are benefiting from the financial service outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Excellent points. And I think I really want to segue, and we do know the gaps. We're fully aware, the figures support it. But what are some supportive and conducive environments? I know, Izero Martha, you always talk about that. Creating a conducive environment for gender intentional frameworks. But, you know, like I want to bring up SACCOs, for instance. How are SACCOs or different microfinance institutions, savings and credit cooperatives, how is that changing women's lives financially? And even, let's go even further into, you know, the relevance of having female agents. How would that contribute to bridging the gap? And yeah, whoever, this one is an open question, so whoever feels compelled to answer, by all means.
Thank you. As a regulator, just I said before, there has to be a law. Data law is first, and also national digital ID. So we work together with these institutions like National Digital ID program to include all, to have all customers or bank account owner with financial institutions this digital ID. This is one of the initiatives that included in the National Digital Payment Strategy and also in the Financial Inclusion Strategy. So another is the gender disaggregating data. This also has included in the strategy, and also we work out as a project with UNCDF and start the project implementing. Now it's currently under awarding of the supplier or the vendor to give these services to our project. So in this, when we implemented the gender classification, currently we are now collecting data manually through computers. So we decide or see how the gender gap is growing or decreasing by seeing this gender classification data. So it's important for us when implemented clearly this data to make decisions or to propose any gender-centric use data for the policy makers, and also use this as a directive to implement all financial institutions. So this is one. The other is maybe when we have got this gender classification data or specific, we also has instruct or promote to do exercise or design the financial institutions, especially digital payment service providers, to specifically know where is the problem of gender, because the digital payment service providers are the ones that are engaging unserved financial or unserved gender classifications. So this maybe help them to identify where the problem is, and also to solve the gender-centric use cases. This is, I think, my reflection on this.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone that would like to elaborate? I see you reaching for the mic. Okay. And yeah.
Okay, I just want to reflect on the need for the female agents. Actually, it's becoming a debate that do we really need female agents in providing such services? We are saying that even the data, the evidence showed that we need to have the female agents because, for example, in Muslim-dominated community, the women might not be comfortable to discuss about or to contact a man to discuss about to get services. And also her husbands might not be interested. So in that case, the female agents need to have be there. And also, while we are talking about empowering women, why we are not giving such opportunity for them? So the female agents are very important in order to ensure that there is inclusivity, and also in order to ensure that all are benefiting from the financial inclusion.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. That was a powerful last statement. Sandy, do you have any reflections?
Thank you, Leah. I would specifically like to reflect on the savings and credit cooperatives. In various regions of the continent, they're known in different names or under different names. Where I come from, they're called Stokvels. I think in some places in West Africa, it's Isusu. I'm not sure what it's called here in, what is it called? Ikur. So I think we understand that really it's dominated by women, those savings and corporate schemes. And for the most part, it's really just you save, you receive. There's no wealth creation, or the empowerment element is lacking. If it is there, it's very, very, very minimal. So I think how we can leverage digital payment systems, for instance, to assist these women to move from that hand-and-mouth saving approach to one that's more wealth-creating is, if, for instance, they are to all contribute, make their contributions into one account, that account earns interest during the duration that the money is being held, oftentimes that's 12 months, then they can learn that, oh, money actually grows within this 1 year period, whether the amount is substantial or not. I think it's just that understanding, that concept of money growing. And then we can further capacitate them to maybe pool funds, to purchase or build schools, and you know, it goes beyond that. But I think that is really a key and low-hanging fruit that we could leverage in terms of bringing that group into the digital financial sector and market towards women empowerment and gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. And that is, I'm not going to keep you guys any longer because I know everyone's hungry. So let's wrap this panel discussion. Thank you, and give our wonderful panelists a round of applause. Yes. And, you know, I want to mention one last note. If you want to know a bit more about gender intentionality, or even where to start, you have wonderful women around this entire event space. So please feel free to approach any of us, and we are happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Wonderful to see a full panel of women. The next panel discussion is going to focus on the transformational impact of digital payments in the public sector. Our esteemed moderator is Mr. Ibrahim Hussein. He has over 20 years of extensive experience in program and portfolio management across various sectors. He's currently serving as the country coordinator for Ethiopia at the United Nations Capital Development Fund, or UNCDF. Ibrahim is dedicated to advocating inclusive digital economies and sustainable development, particularly focusing on marginalized groups such as women and youth who encounter obstacles in accessing finance, markets, and services. Prior to his role with UNCDF, Ibrahim served as the senior project manager at the UNECA. So please help me in welcoming Ibrahim to the stage. He's already here, he's on time. You get 30 minutes so that it's known, 30. I will be timing it.
You got it.
All right.
All right, thank you, Manna. I'm so excited, so I started walking before she even called my name. So you can see how important this session is. Good afternoon, everybody. As Manna said, my name is Ibrahim Mamma. I'm the country coordinator for the UN Capital Development Fund, the UNCDF, and honored to be here with you today, sponsoring this event, supporting this event, a historic event that's discussing for the first time digital payments and the growth and potential of digital payments for inclusive digital economies. UNCDF, for those of you who might not know, makes public and private finance work for the poor in low income countries by offering last mile finance models that unlock public and private resources, and especially at the domestic level in order to reduce poverty and support inclusive digital economies and growth. As you have seen yesterday and today, and the sessions are getting more exciting, the last session was a really tough act to follow. So if I do well, I'm quite excited. If I don't, well, Teddy is my good friend, and I'm partially going to blame it on Ramadan because I'm fasting, but it's going to be an exciting event. So we're here to discuss about issues on the potential of digital financial services, and most importantly, digital payments in transforming the public sector. Yeah, but particularly within the public sector, we're looking at transforming public service delivery. You've heard it earlier yesterday as well in the video intervention from His Excellency the Honorable Prime Minister, when he talked about the challenges Ethiopia is facing in terms of processing cash, processing, printing, distributing, transporting cash, and the heavy burden it has on the overall economy and the cost implication it had. Now, also importantly, the governor stated yesterday that since October 2023, digital payments have surpassed cash payments, and they continue to do so in the years ahead because the outlook looks great. So there's going to be more digital payments coming in. And during a couple of weeks ago, on the Digital Ethiopia 2025 review meeting, Honorable CEO Freyot of Ethio Telecom stated that we have to work towards reducing the burden of queuing. This sounds much better when I say it in Amharic. Selfin maskarrat allabin, as much as possible, by making sure that we use digital payment systems to make sure public services are more efficient, thereby reducing the burden of queues. Because right now, most of the challenges that we see are queues costing time and, most importantly, resources to the citizens. So with that in mind, and with this backdrop, I'm going to call up my panel, and we're going to discuss about how transformational digital payments can be for improving public service delivery. And for this, I'm going to be joined by Dr. Abiot Sinamo from Ministry of Innovation Technology. I'd like to kindly ask you to come to the stage when I kindly call your names, please. Dr. Abiot Sinamo from Ministry of Innovation and Technology. We have Mr. Gazain Faisa from Ministry of Health. Yeah. We have Ms. Phyllis Kamau, Visa. She's Head of Government Solutions for Sub-Saharan Africa, Phyllis Kamau. And we have Mr. Patsion Chernet, who is the CEO and co-founder of Orbit Health and Orbit Innovation Hub. And last but not least, we have Mr. Daut Mulgeta from Ethiopian National Digital ID Office. Ladies and gentlemen, please come to the stage and help me welcome them. Thank you. All right, I am missing Dr. Abiot Sinamo, but I think he'll join us. He might be delayed. Okay, thank you. So no introductions required. We're just going to jump into it. And I'm going to start my question with issues related to the latest developments that we see in Ethiopia, which is the digital ID. So my first question will be for Dawit in terms of how secure national digital ID systems enable improved public service delivery, and in so doing, what are the ongoing efforts to ensure that digital ID programs and services are made to be inclusive?
Okay. Hi, Ibrahim. Hi, Phyllis. Hi, Bazion. Nice to meet you. Happy to be on this panel. So national ID now, we are at a critical point in national ID's program to provide universal digital ID to every resident in Ethiopia. And that's because, as you've recognized or discussed in the past, digital ID is going to be a critical foundational ID for Ethiopia or digitally enabled services. It's also going to be the trust framework, especially when you talk about digital payment. It's absolutely critical that there is a secure and reliable digital ID system that runs underneath it. What does that mean? It means, especially for payment platforms, we have eKYC services, know your customer services, that is based on digital ID. And this is something that we didn't have in Ethiopia before. In fact, this program, especially the scale-up phase of this program, started about 2 years ago. We are now at 4 million people that have registered or are holding digital ID. It's still a critical milestone, but we hope by the end of this year or in the next year and a half, we'll hit a critical milestone of about 20 to 25 million people, which we think that's a point of no return. A critical mass of people, especially given Ethiopia's size of the population. I've heard our Ghanaian friends speak today. Ethiopia is much, much larger than Ghana, so it will take a bit of time to have our digital ID kind of distributed across the entire population. But on a conceptual level, it's going to build the trust framework for digital and digitally enabled services. But also, most critically, eKYC is going to be an important stepping stone that this ID will provide. And of course, when we designed our digital ID system, we also made sure that offline onboarding can happen. For instance, offline authentication and also onboarding, remote onboarding can happen. A good example is the Apollo platform that Bank of Abyssinia developed. They're already doing onboarding remotely, and this is going to go a long way into ensuring that we bring unbanked population of Ethiopia, which is estimated to be about 35% to 38% currently, into the banking sector. And of course, once they are brought into the banking sector, we expect them to be in the tax net. We expect them to have business licenses and basically be part of the digital economy. And then, of course, lastly, but most importantly, is financial access and inclusion by way of loans, non-collateralized loans. We say in digital ID that identity is the new collateral. So we think that giving people access to digital identity will ultimately allow them to use their digital identity as a collateral. And Vice Governor was saying today that National Bank has started a registry for movable assets. There is going to be a credit scoring bureau. And all this, we expect them to be customers of digital ID on the way to ensuring inclusion, digital inclusion, also digital transformation.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. This session, we've heard data is the new collateral. Dave is saying now identity is the new collateral. So I think we're shifting into more digital collaterals, which makes it even more fascinating. So let's just jump into the use cases now. Gazany, I'm going to come to you in terms of health sector use cases. So how are digital payments envisaged to actually improve health sector service delivery? And on concrete terms, what programs or initiatives are currently in place to leverage the power of digital payments in improving health service delivery?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be part of this such types of conferences to express the scenarios from the health institutions and from the Ministry of Health. As you know that for the economy to have be it a digital way or the cash to transact normally or healthily, there should be a healthy citizen in the country. So for that, the health sector is one use case that you all to think of and provide a solution or help us to improve the service delivery at our health institutions. You know that in the community level, we do have about 18 health posters that's very close to the community, and also the hospitals are about 400. All these give provide services, but for the service that they provide, they collect many, cash. So that cash has to be collected by providing the receipt on manual or the paper receipts. So even if you sponsor, be it from the city or from abroad, to sponsor someone who is in the rural area that to get health service at hospital, first that person has to get the cash from the nearest bank and then has to take to the health service area. So during that, there will be a theft or the bribery, which is common. So having this, we are working on actually improving the health service delivery for hospitals or health centers by implementing the electromedical record systems. I think Pazion can help me on this as well, because we are working on that together. So in that case, we started to digitize the services, but still we remain on the digitizing the cash collecting areas. So this is one use case that the fintech can think of. And the other is from the rural areas that collecting the health insurance package. We do that manually. Actually, Brooke from Telever has stated in his presentation or discussion yesterday that it's newly started. But it is from the market, it is very huge, and we do have lots of gaps. So ministry is working on implementing these digital payments for health service delivery aspects together or parallel to the improvement of the digital service delivery. So that's
wonderful. Thank you, Gazain. Patsion, I'm going to come over to you while we're on the topic of health. You're coming from the private sector perspective and practice as well. What innovative solutions are currently being practiced to integrate digital payment systems in their current state and potentially in the innovation state as well into improving public sector health service improvement?
Okay, thank you. I guess when we look at healthcare service delivery, we divide it into two. There's a sick care, what that means is that for someone that's sick, being able to receive the care that's necessary. But at the same time, we have a preventive care, which is what we call wellness. In these two different scenarios, we also look into ecosystems around them. For example, within the sick care space, where you go to a hospital, but it's not just you and the doctor that are transacting services. You buy medicine, you need laboratory services, radiology, what have you. By that level of transaction by itself triggers another dimension where we call what we call the digital ecosystem, which is very early, very fragmented, as Gazang indicated. Currently, we are implementing an electronic medical record across both public and private facilities. We're in a very early stage of digital adoption within the health system. So without having a solid expansion of these digital services, it would be very difficult to talk about transformation within the care transaction. So hence, part of the integration with national ID or digital ID, you need to have systems that are understanding, capturing information of patients. Ethiopia has over, if you aggregate both private and public facilities, over 7,000 health facilities, including pharmacies and hospitals and health centers and what have you. The digital penetration and digital literacy is just less than probably 5%. So I guess the lion's share of work has to be still done by the private sector as well as in partnership with the public sector, which is similar to what we are currently doing with Ministry of Health. The mission critical of any digital transformation is digitization. Hence, digital literacy becomes critical. Now, let me come back to the actual service transaction dimension. You go to a hospital, if you are sick, you might not have enough money. So where do you get access to cash? Probably banks are not even at that level currently where you can actually buy medicine, pay later. Such schemes are not known here in Ethiopia. They are just in a very early infancy. Our insurance space, currently CBHI, sort of community-based health insurance, covers sort of the lower class of society. But above that, there's still room for microinsurance and corporate insurance and whatnot. I guess with this full maturity, we will be able to see, healthy society as a productive society. And finally, the policy dimension is something that's limiting. For example, microinsurance space in Kenya is far advanced as an industry. It's not just product providers, but rather there's a strong, solid insurance industry in Kenya and Ghana. Probably we have some folks from Ghana as well. You travel to Nigeria, the similar scenario. The penetration is still small, but you have an industry. So when it comes to health sector, it's in a very, very early infancy. And I believe digitization, integration with digital ID will open up doors for both private sector, private innovators, as well as the public sector as well.
Thank you, Pazion. So digital literacy is an issue, huh? So we might have a one-on-one talk outside with Bernard later on. Phyllis, I want to come to you from visa perspective and looking at, again, the experience of visa regionally in the Eastern and Sub-Saharan Africa, Eastern and Southern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa overall, but also, again, visa's footprint in Ethiopia is actually growing. Its integration with other sectors is actually expanding. Now, in your opinion and experience, what sort of collaborations between the public and the private sector would help foster the further proliferation of digital payment services, and what perspectives do you foresee for Ethiopia?
Sorry for that. So thank you very much. I think when you think about public sector digital transformation, for this to happen, there's a lot of investment that goes into public sector digital transformation. I think we come from private sector, and we know even in our own private sector, if we want to move ahead with digital transformation, there's a lot that is required in terms of investment, in terms of skills development, in terms of innovation, and that's not different from the public sector digital transformation. And so what we've seen across Africa is that today, each country is moving ahead to transform delivery of public services. So governments are moving to become more digital. In fact, today we are talking about e-government ecosystems. We are talking about smart governments. And basically what this is, it means that services are online, and this means all services, health is one of just a service, but that government is able to bring all the services online. Second is digital documents. You know that citizens come to you every day to access their documents. So these documents are digitized, but they are also available. And then, of course, underlying services and access to government documents is always going to be payments. Now, across all these three pillars, there's a lot of investment that government has to put in to bring these ecosystems to life. Whether they're dealing with legacy systems that are even fragmented, or they are basically manual. There's just a lot that is going behind to make this happen. So the opportunity that is there is that this digital transformation has to be led as a collaborative effort between the government and the private sector. And the government has to create an enabling environment where financial institutions, technology companies, today we are talking about GovTechs, can thrive to enable government to move forward. And so when you really think about what we want to bring in terms of transformation, even the digital ID, all these ecosystems, for them to become alive, there has to be adoption. And so if private sector is not leading adoption of where government wants to take the population, it will not happen. And case in point is the transport mandates that happened last year.
So government comes and issues a mandate that fuel sector should be digitized. For that to have happened, for adoption to have happened, private sector financial institutions needed to come in and create, the platforms for the citizens to be able to pay. And so this is where the heart of collaboration between private sector and government in terms of public sector transformation and overall transformation of digital payments really happens. Again, even when you think about today, we've launched QR payments. Ethswitch has taken us through a whole transformation that they are leading. If that will not be driven by actual adoption by private sector companies, that QR adoption will not happen. Okay? And for that to happen, it's the role of government to now create the right environment for private sector to thrive, for private sector to invest into the ecosystems to drive adoption and growth of digital payments. And so it's important that the regulators think through the business models that financial institutions are able to reinvest and grow digital payments. The third pillar is around innovation. In terms of digital payments, we will always talk about modernization of digital payments. We will never stop to modernize and to grow. For this innovation and modernization to be driven, then private sector and financial institutions are at the heart of that. So first is regulation and the right policy environment to drive modernization, but also it's the private sector investing into this and also helping government to drive innovation. There has to be a very good appetite between how private sector, financial institutions, and the regulator and government agencies collaborate, build some level of public-private partnerships to drive innovation and adoption of new technologies. We are in private sector, we are Visa, we are global, so we come across a lot of best practices and global, information, and unless this is adopted by our financial institutions and, ecosystem, then the digital transformation will not happen. And then, of course, it's the hygiene issues. It's awareness. I think we had a whole panel here of private sector players in Ethiopia around financial literacy, around cybersecurity, ensuring that payment ecosystems are secure so that our citizens can trust these ecosystems. So at the heart of transformation is a government that's leading the right regulation and policy, and also an environment that allows private sector investment into the right technology, and all players, not just like banks. It has to be fintechs, it has to be technology service providers that will then bring the momentum. When I think about Ethiopia, I've been in this market working for the last 5 years. I mean, we were here when we started, the payment strategy 3 years ago, and where we were, 27% in terms of financial inclusion. Today we are saying that number has doubled. There is opportunity, and that re-emphasizes the critical role the central bank plays in actually enabling the right regulatory environment for us to enable digital transformation and for everybody to come and invest. I think we are looking at a new Ethiopia where, we know that foreign investment is being encouraged, the space is being opened for all players to come in, fintechs are thriving, and I think the central bank is investing a lot of time to understand business models even for fintechs. How are they going to make money and how do they continue to drive investment so that we expand acquiring, merchant acceptance, digital payments, instant payments, even for small value transactions. What does that mean? And so for me, what I see is that there is environment for growth and digital transformation. And this is being driven by different sectors of the government, both the central bank, the Ministry of Innovation and Technology, up to the level of the Prime Minister's office. And what we've also seen across Africa, that leadership at the highest level to drive transformation is critical to move the needle in the country.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Phyllis. David, let me come back to you again one more time. Then now we understand, and you've coined it very well. Identity is a collateral. Although Gazani is saying health is collateral. We're looking at so many collaterals today. But identity is a collateral, and you have highlighted very well the importance it plays in advancing digital payments. How come we're not seeing a ubiquitous application of identity right now? What are the major challenges that are holding us back from having an expanded implementation of digital ID services?
Well, I mean, it's a number of factors, right? First, the adoption, I mean, this is a journey of 2 years, right? I mean, digital ID from the very conception, it's a long journey, but really, digital ID from a service lens began about 2 years ago. So given that 2-year span, you can say, I think we've done a good job of accelerating the adoption of digital ID. And also not just adoption, I mean, the numbers, I think, don't do justice to how much work has been done in terms of integrating use cases. Because number one, all banks, all 32 of them now, are integrating with digital ID. And of course, a big thank you to National Bank and the work that went behind it, and then of course, Bankers Association, and again, Ethswitch, working with us to make sure that there's a widespread, from a technology point of view, adopting it. Because I think with our KPI, you know, people always look at how many people are registered, how many people are actually walking around with digital IDs on their hands and their wallets and their digital devices. But from a use case point of view, if you ask me, there is no sector that we haven't touched, really. And the financial sector is a big one. For obvious reasons, we're working with them. But if you go into the health sector, education, in fact, the first wave of 1 million people that we registered came from Ministry of Education. This where students were doing 12th grade exam. So it was a seamless integration we had with them. But any sector you can think of that in Ethiopia that has a public-facing touch point has in one way or another started working with us or integrated with us. So from that point of view, I don't think there has been quite a challenge. I think what the challenge is when it becomes at a transactional level. Say Ibrahim walks into, I'm going to name a bank, Bank X, and then provides his physical credentials. Of course, I mean, most bank tellers or someone walking, if you give that card to a traffic police, they struggle because, you know, identity in Ethiopia has always been seen as something that you hold in your wallet. It's a card that has your photo, identifies where you live. This is a federal system, and so in a way also identifies where you come from. So that behavioral switch hasn't happened. So we still have people coming and say, no, but this is fake, we can't accept this. They disregard the fact that the card behind it actually has a QR code, a digitally signed QR code that can identify that person almost 100% using the biometric data that we collect. So, I mean, yes, there is a behavior element to it, that we haven't done well. So that, I think, eventually we'll get there, especially now. I think what we are doing, most of it is in Addis, but we need to go to the regions. We need to build on the farmer stack, or the stack that Minister of Agriculture is building. There is a farmer profile initiative now happening at Minister of Agriculture. My friend from Lersha can speak about it. Abraham is here, I know. But that will happen when we are integrating with Minister of Agriculture, and then farmers, there will be digital farmers. That's the vision, right? But also, I mean, there's also limitations with the infrastructure. When we began, of course, such an undertaking of registering every individual, every resident in Ethiopia. I'm not talking about just Ethiopians. We're talking about refugees. We're talking about any legal resident in Ethiopia. Takes a huge amount of resources, which our government, to be honest, does not have available in its coffers to do. So you always have to go for external funding for this kind of rollout. So it took us about 2-3 years to convince the World Bank that this is worth it. This is a critical building block for the digital transformation that Ethiopia is building. So that journey by itself took us a long time, but we're happy now that we have the resources. That won't be an issue. We'll have all the kits available. And I think I'm happy to say that in terms of use cases, we've done very well making sure that everybody has some sort of touch point with us. So we are at that point of takeoff. But the behavior element will be there. We need to do a lot of communication. We need to do a lot of kind of really go down to the grassroots level and really engage with citizens. Now it's no more institutional level, it's no more at government ministry level, leadership level. It has to do with citizens. That we need to start very, very soon. So yeah, that.
Thank you, Daud. And use case being one of the mechanisms to change behavior. And then let's go back to health. Passion, I'm coming to you. What are the major challenges right now within the digital health service provision and integration of digital payment services? Yeah, Daud talked about the ID-related issue, but what core challenges do you see and what solutions are there in front of us?
I guess when it comes to challenge, I mean, we can sort of mention quite lots of them. But now I wanted to bring a different light into what's been happening in the last at least 4 or 5 years since Corona came. As you can imagine, the accelerating the testing, finding out who has the virus, and isolating and all that. It took lots of time and innovation. So shrinking down the amount of time it was taking 2.5 weeks to 12 hours, then 6 hours. And then, of course, now we have technology that will just detect immediately, right? Then the health sector widely adapted some level of digitization, digital component of transaction or monitoring, understanding data and whatnot. So there has been a lot that's been happening. Now, at the same time, I think where we are right now, we cannot just follow this little, tiny steps, but at the same time aspiring to transform the entire country. So it's a big country. So one of the things that we learn, for example, in our incubation program, it's a national program. When we recruit someone from Jijiga versus Dredawa versus Addis, their understanding, exposure, understanding of challenges and problems in their community is far different than from each other. So what that does is we need to reframe how we are looking at digital transformation, digital solutions, and then adoption at the same time. And I believe the 4 critical dimensions have to come together, whether it's health or education or agriculture for that matter. We need to have good product, innovative product. You need to have well-trained digital literacy again, awareness of services, transactions, but at the same time processes, and of course policy. Ethiopia is one of those countries where what we call policy on demand happens. You don't even know if you need it, but then you find out that you don't have policy, so you hold things back. Now, the sandbox idea is opening up doors for us. If we really consider the innovators, policymakers, and the actual sector players coming together, forming the sandbox concept, we can accelerate and expedite the sort of the amount of innovation that should happen on the ground. I know we are running out of time, but there are several use cases, especially when it comes to adoption of digital ID. Some critical sectors, health is one of them, because you have folks from birth to death, the entire citizen, if you will, that could be a part of this use case. At the same time, health is not adequate. You can link it with education. You can link it to the bank. You can link it to anything you can imagine that demands public services. So I guess sandbox concept is widely successful continent-wide. I think we should adapt it in Ethiopia as well.
Super. Thank you. Time is always running out when you're having a nice conversation. So I'm going to give one last round of quick shots for everybody. Gazanya, I'll start with you. Quick perspective from Ministry of Health side in terms of how best to further expand the adoption of digital payment systems into health service delivery. What are the key milestones that we should look forward to within what the Ministry of Health is doing?
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Ministry of Health working, preparing the standard based on the Digital Ethiopia. We call it the Digital Health Blueprint that identify digital payment and the unique identifier as one of the priority area to work on. So the national ID coming, and then we are working on that with national ID program. So we have hope to solve issues regarding the identifier of clients across the health sector, so that the seamless referral case will happen, and all the treatments like the diabetes or the ART patients, whatever, will be identified uniquely across. And the other is digital payment. So in the health service, we do have, we just as Paziona said, it's almost on the early stage, but we have started to automate the health service. So for that, the payment aspect is not yet started, or still we are using the the normal or the traditional one, but having the solutions like the QR code and other payment platforms, an integrated payment platform will solve the issues that we have currently. And for that, we are working, preparing how we can leverage such service delivery with the help of partners like the Better Than Cash Alliance and others working on these digital payment improvements in the ministry. So we hope we will, in the future, still the ministry, the health service delivery also will be improved and be part of the digital technology.
Definitely will be, definitely. Phyllis, from African experiences perspective, what best practices do you see potentially applicable to Ethiopian context?
Yeah. So in terms of best practices, I think one is layering digital ID to provision of public sector services. It's very critical because it helps to identify and know the population and then layer that to actually provide services. I think countries that are moving towards e-government and proper public sector digitization are doing that. Kenya is an example, although digital identification of people in Kenya is long before that, but they actually have used identification to then layer on services. And when I say that, what I mean is that when you go to access any government services, you have to first be identified, whether you are a person or you are a business. And so that helps to actually accelerate services and then kind of consolidate e-government, because what we see is a second challenge, a lot of fragmentation of government ecosystems. Systems can't speak to each other. So you have legacy system, expensive investments. And so what we are seeing as a second trend is governments are consolidating, centralizing their digital e-government platforms. So you are bringing the digital ID, and then you are bringing services into a single portal where citizens can actually access these services and kind of then build the big data, build eKYC upon it, build digital, services and access to financial services on top of that. And when I say centralized government services, I think we've seen the eCitizen platform in Kenya, and government now trying to bring all services online. We have the Irembo system in Rwanda. We have Ghana.gov in Ghana. And kind of what we are seeing is a trend to actually build all these centralized ecosystems and use them to actually, give services, whether it is health, education, the verticals, so that they are easily accessible to our citizens. And what we know is that when you create efficiency in public sector services, it drives economic growth, it drives GDP, it saves time, and it enables, businesses and citizens to thrive. And so we've seen that trend towards e-government, and ourselves as Visa, I think we are working to enable these ecosystems. We've been working with governments to enable the platform. We are in partnership with the digital ID and with our financial institutions in the country, just to see how we can create robust platforms, for the delivery of public services, and also digitize and enable digital payments to thrive. Thank you,
Phyllis. Dawit and Patsy, on one final question for both of you. Now, the privacy and data protection law is endorsed by Parliament. Now, just quickly, if you can touch upon that, how do you expect that to really shift the way we're working now in terms of data exchange in the health service?
Yeah, no, I think that also answers the other dimension where currently there are several things that happen, including the PDP, and of course you all heard the Prime Minister's. I don't want to sort of piggyback on what happened, but it's a major shift of by the government. So which means there's a conducive environment that's been created. It didn't happen overnight. So what it should do is for the private sector to have a mindset to accelerate growth. Whatever it is that we are doing, we should be able to accelerate it. And then the GAP Plus model should definitely work for us, government, academia, and the private sector and development partners. And without partnership, I don't think we can advance that far. But this is an amazing time for private sector because government identified their roles, and then I think we can really accelerate any innovation. Thank you.
I think, let me start from the simple one. Now that the PDP law is passed, so the World Bank can give us all the 350 million that they promised. That was one of the conditions for effectiveness. So that puts all of us at ease, including the entire country. Though that means we have the resources to do what we've been mandated to do. But in all earnestness, even before the PDP, national ID was over-designed for privacy. I would say that because even before the PDP, we make sure our proclamation included the key provisions to ensure data sharing, data management, and kind of being a safeguarding of data. For national ID, the subject is the owner of data. We are only holding it for them. So we recognize that even before the PDP, but having the PDP obviously gives us an enormous level of credibility. Because I still have friends who ask me, are you going to use my data to reverse search, or the government is going to use the data, the biometric data to track me, and kind of all the surveillance issues that come up. And of course, I mean, we keep saying, no, we won't track you, but now that there is a law, I think it provides a huge amount of credibility to national ID, and also puts us accountable. Not only us, but the people and our partners that are going to be using national ID for authentication. They will be legally held accountable if somehow they breach that privacy law. But I also want to say that the data is end-to-end encrypted from a technology point of view, so that even national ID, without the consent of the individual, we cannot access an individual's data. So yeah, it's a great news for us. Very happy about that.
Superb. No, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. My 3 key takeaways are, first off, use cases are essential. Yeah, for digital payments to actually take off, use cases, hanging on use cases, attaching them with use cases, and especially in this particular case, health sector. Second one, layering of different services, yeah? In terms of from public service perspective, in terms of attracting and building trust, layering of different services is found to be essential. Third, and most importantly, is the promotion of the key digital public infrastructure, such as the ID, and then the payment follows. But most important, the advent of the data protection framework. Data exchange is going to make the proliferation of digital payment services a lot more ubiquitous. Please thank my panel for me, and thank you for listening.